Empathy. In my head. Hello everybody, welcome to In My Head. Two quick things. The first, I'm from the United States of America, so if you're from a different country or a different culture, the things that I say here, they may not apply the same to you. The second, I am not a licensed professional. Here on In My Head, I give my take on mental health issues, and today I'm going to talk about how to feel empathy for a narcissist. Now, I know right off the bat, some people are going to be saying, why would you want to do that? Well, there's a lot of reasons why you may want to do that. For one thing, you could be a therapist who wants to know how to have empathy for their client. You could also be a family member of somebody who's narcissistic. You could be a friend. You could be a lover. You could be working with somebody who's narcissistic. We can't always eliminate people from our lives, and we may not always want to eliminate people from our lives. Just because somebody has narcissistic traits, that doesn't make them a bad person. It doesn't mean that we can't enjoy them. It doesn't mean that we don't need to have them around. With that said, having empathy does not mean that you have to tolerate bad behavior. If somebody does something that's hurtful towards you, you should have a boundary against that. You can have empathy for what it is that motivated that person to do something that would be hurtful, but that doesn't mean that you have to tolerate any kind of harmful behavior. You can be both empathetic and have boundaries. Now, empathy is something that you can use for anybody. It's something that you can feel for anybody. It doesn't have to be somebody who's harmed you, but I want to also add a little word of caution here, that just because somebody has harmed you before, that doesn't automatically make them into a narcissist. On the internet and even in professional circles, unfortunately, people throw the word narcissist around to encompass all sorts of bad behaviors that frankly have nothing to do with narcissism. This is stigmatizing, and this is something that needs to stop. So let's take a moment to clarify, what is narcissism? Well, narcissism usually involves a pattern of attention-seeking or a pattern of grandiosity, or a combination of the two of those. These are personality traits. They can be changed, but somebody who has a problem with narcissism probably has difficulty changing these personality traits. They fall under the category of antagonism, which basically means that it puts somebody up against somebody else in an abrasive way. These personality traits are a way of coping with the world and a way of coping with anxiety, but unfortunately, because they're antagonistic traits, they're also likely to activate some defensive behaviors in you that you're going to want to cope with. And here's the thing, it's hard to have empathy for somebody when you're feeling defensive. When somebody gets you in that right spot, when they make you angry or they make you feel worthless and helpless, that's when we get defensive. At that point, we start to naturally withdraw away from them. We maybe start to get into fight or flight feelings, and our brain power starts to go down. We don't have the capacity to be able to do things like empathize with someone. In fact, some of you may know exactly what I'm talking about because you're experiencing it right now. You might have seen the title of this video before you even clicked on it, and it got you in a place that feels personal. So you might have turned towards that fight or flight, and you may be mentally attacking me right now out of defensiveness. You may have already labeled me as a narcissist, and I'm thinking you probably don't have much empathy for me right now. So, if you're feeling defensive and you still want to have empathy for someone, narcissist, not narcissist, whoever they are, you're going to have to deal with that defensiveness that's going on inside. You're going to have to deal with that anxiety. You have to cope with the anxiety before you can ever have the capacity to feel empathy for someone. As long as you are feeling defensive, that's going to be a block against you feeling empathy. And if you understand this, then you understand why people who have narcissistic traits have difficulty experiencing empathy. Empathy involves you imagining what somebody else is experiencing without you being in the picture, and this is why you can't be defensive, because when you're defensive, it's all about you. If you want to feel empathy, you have to temporarily let go of yourself and let go of all that stuff that you may be feeling. This is why you got to cope with it and bring it down to a manageable level. And you have to imagine what the person you want to feel empathy for is experiencing. Now, to do this, you have to have an understanding of who they are, and you have to understand what living life is like from their experience, not from yours. So what are the things that they like and what are the things that they dislike? What things are important to them? What motivates them? What are the important events that have happened in their lives? Remember, you have to be able to answer these questions from their perspective, not from yours. Don't mix judgment together with empathy. You can disagree with somebody, you can have your judgments, but you can't put them together with the empathy. You can disagree with why somebody's feeling some way, you can disagree with what they're doing about it, and yet still understand why they feel hurt, why they feel good, whatever it is. The two can happen at the same time. But often we use judgment as a way of being defensive, as a way of keeping that distance and not having to imagine what it's like to be somebody else, and that gets in the way of the empathy. So I caution about mixing judgment together with empathy. Something that's important to note here is that not every person who's narcissistic is the same. Every person has their own life experiences and their own unique perspective. You can't just slap a label on somebody and then expect that you understand them. Empathy, again, is about putting yourself aside, putting those judgments, putting those labels away, learning about somebody else, and trying to imagine, wow, what does that feel like? Now, there's another word of caution that I have to say here, which is that you don't want to lose yourself in the feeling of empathy. Even though it's true, yes, you have to put yourself aside to have the capacity to feel what somebody else is experiencing. That doesn't mean that you have to let go of yourself completely. Don't disregard your own emotions. As I said in the beginning, if somebody is harming you, if they're doing bad behavior, that doesn't have to be tolerated. No one's obligating you to feel empathy for anybody. And your emotions and your experience do matter. What I hope is that by feeling empathy for somebody who maybe it's not so easy for you to feel empathy for, it enriches your experience of life and it helps you to have a greater understanding of the variety of people that live in this world. Having empathy for people that maybe it's hard for us to have empathy for allows us to see them in a new way, and it allows us actually to be able to better cope with the times when we feel like they're harming us, because maybe we can see past why they're harming us to what's really going on inside. As I mentioned, if you're going to feel empathy for someone, you're going to have to be able to cope with any anxiety and any stress that arises up within you. If you're somebody who has trouble noticing when you're stressed, I have some free worksheets over on my Patreon page. Go check those out. On Patreon, I support people doing work that they love, and my patrons help to support me here in making videos like this, and they help me in my mission of humanizing mental health. Thank you to my patrons. If you like learning about mental health, head over to youtube.com/RyanLiberty, go hit subscribe. And I'd love to hear about your experience. Why is it that you want to feel empathy for a narcissist? Leave that down below in the comments. Please be respectful. I moderate my comments. Thank you for joining me, everybody, here on In My Head. Yeah, I guess I could understand why they feel that way.